My brother called me at 7 inches the morning on my 29th birthday to tell me my mom wanted to know if I was coming to his graduation dinner that weekend. Not to wish me happy birthday. To ask if I could drive 2 hours to sit at a table where no one would look at me anyway. I stared at my ceiling for a long moment. Then I put the phone face down on my nightstand, got up, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat by the window of my apartment watching the sun come up over the Austin skyline. I had a presentation in 3 hours. I had a deal closing at the end of the week. I had $1.1 million sitting in a brokerage account that my family had absolutely no idea existed. And I had spent 29 years being the invisible daughter. Before I tell you what happened 2 weeks later, what my dad found, what he said, and what I did when he called that emergency family meeting, let me ask you something. Have you ever worked twice as hard as everyone around you and still been treated like you had nothing to offer? Like your wins didn't count, your voice didn't carry, and your birthday was just a date on a calendar? Tell me where you're watching from right now, because I want to know how many of us there are. I grew up in a middle-class family in suburban Houston. My dad worked in logistics management. My mom was a part-time bookkeeper who treated her calendar like a military operation. Every appointment, every school event, every recital was logged and color-coded. Unless it was mine. My events were the ones that got bumped when my brother needed a ride somewhere. My recitals were the ones my mom tried to make but never quite did. My brother is 3 years older than me. His name is the one that gets said warmly at family dinners. He is the kind of person who was always almost successful, always one big breakaway, always in the middle of a pivot, always needing just a little more support, a little more time, a little more patience. My parents gave him all of it. They gave him patience like it was an unlimited resource. They gave him money the same way. Growing up, I figured this was just how families worked. He was older, he had struggles, he was finding himself. I was younger, I was fine, I didn't need as much. I told myself that for a long time. I was quiet. I got good grades without anyone asking me to. I applied for college scholarships myself because I didn't want to be a burden. I got into UT Austin on a partial academic scholarship and told my parents I'd handle the rest. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out until I was 27 years old, sitting across from my dad at a Chili's on a Tuesday night, was that there had been a college fund for me. My maternal grandparents had set one up when I was born. By the time I graduated high school, it had grown to just over $34,000. My parents had been listed as custodians, and they had quietly used $31,000 of it to cover my brother's failed restaurant venture when I was 19. I had taken out loans. I had worked 22 hours a week at a campus coffee shop. I had graduated with $28,000 in student debt, and I had never known not for a single day that there had been money set aside specifically for me. My dad told me this by accident. He was explaining why they couldn't help me with something I don't even remember what, something small, and he said, offhand, "Well, you know we already spent down what your grandparents left." And I said, "What do you mean what my grandparents left?" And he got very quiet. And that was how I found out. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat very still, and I ate my chips and salsa, and I said, "Okay." And then I drove home, and I sat in my apartment, and I thought about every loan payment I had made for the past 6 years, every weekend shift, everything I had told myself I couldn't afford, every time I had felt guilty for wanting more than I had. And then I thought, I am done being small. I had been working in real estate for about 2 years at that point. Not selling houses, I was a transaction coordinator at a property management firm, which meant I was the person who made sure every deal closed correctly, every document was filed, every deadline was met. I was good at it, quietly, systematically, invisibly good at it. And I had been paying attention. I had been saving aggressively since my first paycheck. I had read every book, listened to every podcast, taken every free course I could find. When I was 24, I used $18,000 in savings to buy a small duplex in a transitional neighborhood east of downtown Austin. I renovated it myself on weekends with YouTube tutorials and a lot of contractor questions. I rented both units within 3 weeks, cash flow positive from month 1. Then I did it again, and again. By the time I was 28, I had a portfolio of 9 units across 4 properties. Nothing flashy. Nothing my family knew about, because I had stopped sharing things with my family around the time I learned they had spent my college fund on a restaurant that lasted 14 months. The deal that changed everything was a small 8-unit apartment building in the Mueller neighborhood. I found it off-market through a wholesaler contact. I ran the numbers for 3 weeks. I brought in a partner for part of the capital and structured the deal carefully. We bought it, improved it, stabilized the rents, and 14 months later, we sold it to a local investment group for a number that still makes me a little dizzy when I think about it. After splitting the profit with my partner, after taxes, after everything, I walked away with $340,000 on that one deal. Combined with the equity I'd already built in my other properties, my net worth crossed 7 figures before my 29th birthday. Nobody in my family knew any of this. I had not been hiding it as some kind of strategy. I had just stopped telling them things because every time I shared good news, it somehow became about my brother. When I got promoted at 25, my mom said, "That's great. Honey, your brother just got a really exciting opportunity too. Let me tell you about it." When I bought my first duplex, my dad said it was risky, and I should be careful. Nobody asked follow-up questions. Nobody said, "Tell me more." So I stopped offering. By the time I was 29, I had been invisible to them for so long that they had just accepted it as the natural order. 2 weeks after my birthday, the birthday that passed with a single group text from my mom that said, "Happy B-Day, sweetie." With a balloon emoji at 9 p.m., I did something for myself. I had been driving a 6-year-old Civic that I had run into the ground. The air conditioning had stopped working the previous summer. I had been telling myself it was fine. It was not fine. It was 98 degrees in Austin, and I was showing up to property walkthroughs in a car that smelled like hot plastic. So I went to a dealership and I bought a Range Rover Sport, fully loaded, deep blue, cream interior, every option available. I paid $112,000 and I drove it off the lot the same afternoon. I posted one picture on my personal Instagram, just the front of the car in the dealership parking lot, afternoon light hitting the hood, no caption. I had 300 followers, mostly friends from college and some real estate contacts. I did not tag a location. I did not post anything about what I did for work. But my brother followed me on Instagram. And my brother has nothing but time. He screenshot the photo and sent it to my parents with the message, "Did you know about this?" I know this because my mom called me 40 minutes after I posted and asked me, in a very specific tone of voice, the tone she reserves for things she finds inappropriate, whether I had come into some money recently. I told her I had bought a car. She said, "A $100,000 car?" I said, "Something like that." She went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your father is going to want to talk to you." I was not worried. I was 34 years old in every way that mattered, even though I had just turned 29. I had been managing my own finances for a decade. I did not need my father's approval for a car purchase. I said, "Okay, Mom." And I went back to reviewing a lease agreement. My dad called that evening. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was doing. He said, "Where did the money come from?" And I knew, right then, what this was. This was not concern. This was not curiosity. This was panic. Because somewhere in the calculation that my family had been running on me for 29 years, the one where I was fine, I was manageable, I was low maintenance, I did not require investment or attention or a slice of anything, a variable had changed, and it had broken the equation. I said, "I've been investing in real estate." He said, "What does that mean?" I said, "It means I buy properties, I improve them, I rent or sell them." He said, "For how long?" I said, "About 5 years." Another silence. Then he said, "We need to do a family meeting. This weekend, Saturday, at the house." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I said, "Sure, Dad. I'll be there." Now, before I tell you what happened at that meeting, I want to ask you something. What would you do if you found out your family had been treating you like a footnote for your entire life, and the moment they found out you had money, they suddenly wanted a seat at the table? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear from you. I drove the Range Rover to my parents' house on Saturday. My parents live 40 minutes outside of Houston in the same house I grew up in. The same house where my brother's school photos lined the hallway, and mine were in an album in the closet. The same house where Christmas morning always started with his gifts and got to mine when the energy in the room had already peaked. I pulled into the driveway and I sat there for a moment, with the engine running and the air conditioning perfect, and I thought, I am not the same person who used to feel small here. My mom met me at the door. She hugged me in that way she has the hug that is really an assessment, where she is taking inventory of everything about you before she decides how to feel. She looked at the car in the driveway and said, "That is a very big car." I said, "It has great visibility." She did not laugh. My brother was already inside. He was sitting on the couch where he has sat since we were teenagers. In the same posture, slightly reclined, phone in hand, the particular stillness of someone who has never needed to be anywhere urgently. He is 32 years old. He has a degree in communications that he has used in no professional capacity I am aware of. He has started, in the past 10 years, a food blog, a YouTube channel about craft beer, a consulting business that I believe had one client, a dropshipping operation, and most recently, a course teaching other people how to build passive income online. I am not sure what qualifies him to teach that. When I walked in, he looked up and said, "Nice car." The way you say it when you think someone shouldn't have it. My dad came in from the kitchen. He shook my hand. My dad has always shaken my hand at greetings, which I used to think was just how he was. But I noticed years ago that he hugs my brother. He sat down across from me and folded his hands and said, "So, tell us about the real estate." I told them, calmly, factually, the same way I would explain a deal to a lender. I started with the duplex, walked through the portfolio, explained how the capital had compounded, described the Mueller deal. I watched my dad's face as the numbers added up. I watched my mom's expression shift from skeptical to something more complicated. I watched my brother go very still. When I finished, my dad said, "So, what are you worth now, roughly?" I told him. He sat back. My mom made a sound I couldn't quite interpret. My brother said nothing. Then my dad said, "You know, your brother has been working really hard on his business. He has a real opportunity right now. He just needs some capital to scale it." He paused. "I think it would be a meaningful gesture for you to invest in him." There it was. I looked at my brother. My brother looked at me with the expression of someone who has spent his entire life having doors opened for him by other people's hands and has started to believe that is simply how doors work. I said, "How much are you thinking?" My dad said, 50,000 would get him to the next level. Maybe 100 if you're comfortable. I want you to sit with that number for a moment. $100,000. For a course business with no verified revenue, built by someone who has never successfully held a project to completion. From the sister whose college fund they spent without asking, whose birthday they forgot every other year, whose success they had taken no interest in until the moment it became potentially useful to them. I took a breath. I thought about what I wanted to say. I had thought about this moment for 2 years, since the night I found out about the college fund. Not specifically this moment, but this category of moment, the one where my family revealed, without meaning to, exactly what they thought I was for. I said, "I want to ask you something first." My dad nodded. I said, "When I was 19, my grandparents' college fund, the one they set up for me, was about $34,000. When I graduated, I had $28,000 in student loans. I worked 22 hours a week for 4 years because I thought there was no money for school. When did you plan to tell me that there had been?" The room went very quiet. My mom said, "That was a difficult time. Your brother was in crisis." I said, "He opened a restaurant." She said, "He was struggling." I said, "I was struggling too. I just didn't have anyone paying for it." My dad started to say something about how family supports family, about how they had always done their best, about how I was being unfair to bring up old history at a moment like this. My brother said, "I didn't know about the fund either. I don't know if that was true. I decided it didn't matter." I said, "I'm not here to fight about the past. I want you to understand the context for my answer, which is no. I'm not going to invest in the business." My dad said, "So you'll just sit on that money while your brother needs help?" And here is the thing about having spent years being quiet, being manageable, being easy. When you finally speak, you have had a very long time to figure out exactly what you want to say. I said, "I've been investing my money consistently for 5 years. That's why I have it. I'm going to keep doing that. What I'm not going to do is write a check to someone who has never returned an investment in his life, to fund a business I have no confidence in, as a gesture of family loyalty to people who spent $31,000 of my money when I was 19, without ever saying a word about it. I stood up. My dad said, "Sit down." I said, "I drove 40 minutes to hear you ask me for money on his behalf. I think we're done." My mom started crying. My brother said, "This is why no one tells you anything." My dad said, very quietly, "If you walk out that door, you are choosing money over family." I picked up my keys from the table by the door. I turned around and looked at all three of them, my mom with her hands over her face, my brother on his couch, my dad standing in the middle of the room looking at me like I was something that had malfunctioned. I said, "I'm not choosing money over family. I chose myself. I've been doing it for 10 years because no one else was going to." I said, "I hope things work out." And I meant it. Not warmly, but honestly. I did hope things worked out for them. I just understood, standing in that doorway, that things working out for me was going to require creating some distance from people who had spent my whole life looking right through me. I walked out. I got in the car. The air conditioning came on immediately, cold and clean, and I pulled out of that driveway for what I knew was going to be a very long time before I came back, if I ever did. 3 things happened in the 6 weeks after that. The first was that my brother called me twice and texted me once. The calls I let go to voicemail. The text said he had a deck he wanted to share and included a link to a Canva presentation about his passive income course. I did not respond. The second was that my mom sent me a card in the mail. An actual card, the kind with flowers on the front. Inside she had written that she was sorry I felt overlooked and that she wanted to repair things. She said she loved me. She said she hoped I would come to Thanksgiving. I read it 3 times. I put it in a drawer. I haven't decided yet what repair looks like, or if it's possible, or what I need it to include. That's a conversation for another time, when I know she's ready to have it honestly. The third thing was that I hired an estate attorney who specializes in family financial disputes. Not to sue them, I looked at that option and made a deliberate decision that the cost, in time and energy, and whatever shred of relationship might still exist, was not worth it. What I hired her for was to draft a formal letter acknowledging what had happened with the college fund and requesting a written acknowledgement from my parents. Not money, not an apology, though that would have been welcome. Just acknowledgement, in writing, that it happened. My dad signed it 6 weeks later. My mom signed it the same day. I don't know what that means yet. It might mean nothing. It might mean something later. But I have a document now, in a folder in my filing cabinet, that says, "This happened, it was real, and it is recorded." I closed on a new property 2 weeks ago. 6 units, South Austin, solid bones, needs cosmetic work. I'm running numbers on 2 more. I have a meeting next Tuesday with a commercial broker about something larger. My business is not a gesture, and it is not a hobby, and it is not a pivot. It is the thing I built in the years when I was too quiet to fight and too focused to stop. I still think about the girl who graduated college with $28,000 in debt, working the Saturday morning shift at a campus coffee shop, telling herself she was fine. I think about how long she went without anyone noticing. I want to tell her the noticing was never going to come from the direction she was looking. It was going to have to come from herself. If you are that person right now, if you are the one in your family who holds things together quietly, who is always fine, who stopped expecting the celebration a long time ago, I want you to hear this. The invisibility is not because you are less. It is because the people around you got comfortable with taking what you offered without asking what it cost you. That is not a permanent condition. It is a circumstance you can change. It starts with knowing what you are worth, not what anyone has told you. Not what the family narrative says, what you actually have, what you have actually built, what you are actually capable of when no one is watching, when no one is helping, when the only person betting on you is you. I know mine now. It took me a long time and it cost more than it should have, but I know it. The Range Rover is parked outside my building right now, and I do not owe a single person an explanation for it. If this story hit close to home, I want to hear from you in the comments. And if you are new here, welcome to the channel. My name is not important. What matters is that you found this place, and you are not alone.